All right, Stephen, it is fantastic to have you on. I know we've been having multiple conversations, but I'm really excited to bring this to our listeners here. So I'm going to begin just with introductions real quick. I'm Joti Balani. I am founder and managing director of Freshriver.ai. We're a leading consultancy for conversational AI. We're helping the Fortune 100 and now, in fact, 500 strategize and deliver on business outcomes leveraging this tech. Stephen, if you could introduce yourself.
Hi, Jyoti. Very pleased to be here. Thank you. So I'm here based in the UK, and I am the MD and founder of Kira Advisory. And I work with large, medium-sized companies to help them scale and grow, both from a people, process, and technology perspective. So in essence, I help CEOs, top teams, boards to set up, grow, transform their businesses with what is current and enable them to embrace change for the future so they increase market share locally and globally.
Yeah, such an incredibly important topic, right? You hear everything in the news. There's just the markets are going crazy. You look at, some of the high level metrics and goals that people are trying to hit, just so much coming at them. So I'm glad you've taken this helm because I think we really, really need it. And you're a little modest, right? You actually were in top tier ranks yourself in corporate at HSBC, which gives you, exactly the shoes that your clients wear. So I think that's very phenomenal in my view. All right, let's dive right in because I think we've got a lot of things to unpack, right, around innovation. And we use that word. It's been used for so long, disruption, but there's something critical happening underground, right? And I think you're seeing that more broadly, and I'm seeing that in the conversational AI space, right? Let's talk about the fact that we are squarely in the exponential age. And for the listeners, I'd highly recommend, if you guys have not read this, The Exponential Age is a book written by Azeem Azhar, he does an incredible job connecting the dots with everything that's going on around our spaces. But I think we put words into that, right, as to the work we're doing. And I say we're the builders of the exponential age, and we're really helping clients get to that. So talk to me a little bit about what is happening for the clients that you work with and you see broadly to get ready for the exponential age, right? To get ready for transformations. Why are things broken? Like, what is going on? What is the problem here with getting ready for transformation? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting that you mentioned about Azeem Azhar. So even just looking at it from an exponential age perspective, see, change in technology is developing at an exponential rate. Emerging exponential technologies are now increasingly common, and they're massively disruptive, as you mentioned, and they show no signs of slowing down.
Right.
So the result is that there is an exponential gap, as described by Azeem, right? So between the changes to our, ecosystem and the responses of businesses across sectors. So one of the questions is, how can businesses adopt and adapt rapidly? And the situation is that exponential change is fast. So when changes start accelerating, businesses and leaders struggle to comprehend and adopt it in time. And most businesses and leaders are ill-equipped to deal with that rapid change. So the problems that I'm actually seeing at a practical level here. So let's just imagine for a moment and just think of these positively disruptive technologies such as AI or conversational AI, which you're so much, into, machine learning, the metaverse, Web3, the implementation of this appropriately has a direct relationship to business performance and the ability for businesses to grow, build resilience, and become more flexible so they can cope and they can deal with the rapid change. And when change does actually hit them, they're able to adapt to it with ease. So I see most companies experiencing three areas of challenge. One is a strategic drift. And this occurs when companies' strategies no longer fits with that environment around it. So examples of this is, lack of a forward-looking strategy aligned with the adoption of emerging technologies such as, conversational AI, just as I mentioned, or their existing efforts are failing, coupled with poor execution practices because of a broken or a rigid framework to implement. And we talked about, consulting model.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, there is a consulting model, and that's very good, but is it fit for purpose now?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It
So
needs
that's
to evolve. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's number one problem. Number two, it's an experience of overwhelming change, and the business is unable to cope with that change, or they're stuck in old ways and are just fixing those changes tactically and operationally in a perpetual loop without thinking of this in strategic terms. And then the third aspect is leadership and the people aspect. We've got leadership verticals, all the CXOs, for example, and the collective top team. They're not always aligned, and they're not building synergies within each other to help drive purpose-driven transformation because of a mindset issue or a lack of clarity on purpose and priorities, which impact the business and talent workforce. So all of these are connected. They've got a direct implication on performance, on business performance, on growth. And look at all these disruptive technologies coming in.
Yeah. A lot of these companies are getting their lunch eaten. And, something you said, I think frameworks have an expiration date. If you think back to the last 200 years that we've gone through innovation cycles, I talk about how we went from farm to factories. Like, do we really think that farmers with the framework that they had at that time could take that and adapt to what was happening, and moving into the factory and adopting technology? It has to shift. And, all these shifts, these shifts that took place had longer periods of time. And I almost feel like that time is shrinking. So I think that sense of everything's moving at such an alarmingly exponential rate can't even allow people to catch their breath, right? So it's these senior leaders, what I also find, because, we work deeply in one area with AI, they're exactly reflecting what you're talking about, is because they have the old frameworks, and I call them old. I want to tell people they have an expiration date. You have got to change a lot of what is underneath, and your regular movement of reorging every single time, thinking that that's going to solve the problem of how to adopt newer technologies and how are you going to meet the next big growth curve. It's not going to work. I mean, that's sort of the fundamentals, right? So. And I hear this all the time from my clients, behind closed door, they're saying, hey, look, we're bringing in the usual suspects of the large consulting houses, but we're not seeing any results. Something is not right. It's not working. I said, well, that's because you have to shift your mindset. What got you here is not going to get you through this one, this chasm of where you're at and where you need to be. Your current tools are not going to work, right? And it's almost like saying, well, we're not telling you we have the answers, but we will tell you the new, I would say, new brand of consulting models and thinking are much more different than what they're used to, right? And I think that's where we're seeing the senior leaders really like what we bring to the table, because they are struggling with, at the end of the day, give me the business outcomes. Everybody's here to make their numbers, right? Which takes me to the next thing, diving a little bit deeper on outcomes, right? Scorecarding, the concept of co-piloting with these senior leaders. Talk to us a little bit about that. How are you doing that?
Yeah. So the scorecarding is an important aspect. So think of this as, every company has got some element of scorecarding. They look at it from a customer perspective, or from a financial perspective. They look at it from a initiatives perspective, or from a talent perspective, or they also use OKRs, objectives and key results. So depending on what model, but bringing scorecarding into the whole picture, co-piloting business performance on a quarterly basis, because most companies actually do that on a quarterly basis, is a very critical element. So how can we help business leaders to co-accomplish, to co-pilot and help them move through their quarterly scorecards to achieve exponential or 3x or 5x growth and competitive edge, to achieve tangible outcomes. Most companies already have this, but how do you actually directly link that and help them to achieve those outcomes associated with those scorecard elements is a critical aspect.
Yeah, I think it's a great tooling, right? And a sub framework that says, hey, look, every company, large or small, has to work on what are they trying to accomplish over the next, 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, what's a 5-year plan? Although some of my clients are like, we can't even think about 5 years, we got to get past these, we're going to just survive in the next 2 years. Putting scorecards, whatever methodology is being used, OKRs, I think are the more popular ones I've seen as well. You can actually break the problem down into smaller chunks. But then the scorecard is owned by different leaders and groups within a company, right? So there's a organizational design, and then they're all measured by breaking down the big problems into these scorecards. You're actually helping every one of those leaders with their scorecards, right? Because it has to work in harmony for them to actually deliver on the top level, right? So how are you doing that? How are you working and creating that harmonization between the leaders? Because there's a lot of issues there too, like political architectures, people still their power plays. I mean, that can never go away because that's how humans operate. What do you do about that? How do you get them to work together?
Yeah. So you mentioned about the builders and facilitators of exponential age. So with that theme, think of this as a overarching or a new overarching blueprint for each CXO vertical to address problems. And you have 2 levels of it. One is at that CXO level where they have a scorecard, and then there is a collective scorecard as organizationally. But if I'm speaking with a CIO, they would have a scorecard for their business unit, and associated with that would be examples of, well, how are they actually going to be implementing a technology strategy or technology enabled strategy to achieve the broader organizational strategy. So they might have a set of KPIs, traditional KPIs, or they might have a set of objectives and key results, or both. So the first aspect here is to look at the CIO or COO or CEO's scorecards, and then determine, well, are there areas in which they can actually make it more practical and more future forward? And then basically linking that to the group strategy, so that it's all in alignment. Now, that's from a scorecard perspective, and developing it, co-developing it or co-creating it, and then helping them shepherd the implementation of it. The second aspect is, how do you actually bring all of these together? Because it doesn't bode well if one CXO is actually doing very well. Let's say a CIO is doing very well on their scorecard and the COO is not doing very well on their scorecard. There's got to be an alignment, because they actually have to work very much closely on the implementation of, let's say, a technology-enabled implementation.
Yeah.
Whatever's on their scorecard. So that's where the alignment between both leaders come into play. And imagine when you have, let's say, a 4-person management team or an 8-person management team, all CXO sitting there, and if they're not aligned with their scorecards, then how do you actually co-pilot, or how do you actually help them pilot this individually but collectively? And it comes down to mindset.
That's right. So it's almost like you can create a little healthy competition as well, right? You say, hey, look, this framework, shifting this and how to go change and achieve your objectives on a scorecard, because everybody's measured in the end, right? It's a great way for other folks to say, well, I want some of that too, right? So I think it's a great way to pilot, these the new innovation models that you're bringing in, right? Yeah. What are some of your favorite stories, right, with some of the clients that you work? You don't have to name them, I know, with confidentiality, but Tell us a little bit, a few of those good stories, right, to bring this home.
Yeah, no, very good, Jyoti. That's so I had a huge success in fine-tuning strategic plans, leveling up business across multiple dimensions of technology, process, and talent. But also more importantly, aligning those top teams, as we talked about, and enabling their growth and performance by, in this particular example, by 3x. So with one of the clients here, one of the challenges faced by that particular company, and the business leader was the COO. It was of a financial services firm where their revenue is about 20 million plus turnover, with about 14 plus key offices nationally here in the UK. And they were struggling with their business performance, and their focus was primarily on business performance, nothing related to growth and innovation. But after a couple of conversations and a top level assessment, I worked with the top team over 10 non-consecutive days to execute a program of work. Now, the outcome here, because we're really focused on outcomes here, there was a set of interventions that we put together. It was all co-created. Mm-hmm. And their business performance grew by roughly 2.5% in that year. And their top team was purpose-driven after this, and they were equipped to lean in on each other and create synergies within themselves to purposefully give focus to the business transformations that matter to them most. And the way I did that was, firstly, by co-developing with them that future-forward and value-based business strategy, because they had so many strategies in place, but what did they have to do to incorporate some of these emerging technologies?
Yeah.
And then the second aspect was setting that foundation with that top team. So it was not just about, sitting down with a COO. And my questions to them were, how do you interact with the CIO? How do you interact with the chief experience officer, for example, and bringing in alignment between them? And it had the sponsorship of the CEO as well. So set those foundations with the top team by executing within those 10 days an alignment session with the top team. And then the third aspect was just helping them with hands-on execution of a transformation program of work. Now, obviously, that 10 days is a combination of targeted, very specific type of execution of looking at their scorecards, but also looking at their alignment issues, their mindsets, and so forth. And they come out of it knowing, I now am clear about how I need to adopt some of these innovations to increase not only performance, but also growth, and actually how to do it. And then we can go into specifics.
Yeah. There are two things that strike me, and I don't normally see this in, large strategy consultants, because I also had a corporate career, right, 22 years, and I would watch some of these large consulting houses come in and, how they work, and they did a really good job for that era that we were in, right? But I think what you're pointing out is something that I think is direly needed, especially because we're on the other side of the pandemic. Our people are burnt out, and they need direction, and they need new energy. They need, more guidance and feeling purposeful. When you say the word purposeful, right? It's the emotional intelligence, right? That's the one part. And the second part is, you're not only dropping a 200-page strategy deck that says, here's what you should go do, good luck, and you take your payment and you leave. You're actually sitting down and ensuring that it's delivering. It's one thing to tell somebody, oh, you should go do this, but it's quite another to sit down with them and show them. Yeah. I think there's this mentorship element. So I believe emotional intelligence and mentoring is almost like these two secret sauces I think you've got that you're, inputting in here, and why you're seeing the success. Like, how do you sense people's moods are relative to finding purpose in what they're doing? Like, why are we doing this? Like, I get technology, cold hard numbers, business outcomes. I get all of that. That's the capitalistic thing, right? Yeah. This whole emotional element, tell us a little bit about that. What are you seeing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very good point, the emotional intelligence aspect, and the mentorship or the coaching element as well. You see, most of these leaders, they're part of executive teams or even boards, and they're given that direction and that scorecard. Well, you have to meet this objective. But when we take a different approach and just have a one-on-one conversation with them in an hour, some of the questions that we ask and actually delve into the deeper side of things, of where their fears are or where their dreams and visions are, to actually help navigate through what they need to do to achieve their, let's say, program of work or transformation or anything of that sort, is when it actually comes out and they actually admit to themselves, well, I actually don't have this capability to do this particular piece of work here, but this is my dream. And this is the top challenge that I'm actually facing here, and this is what's holding me back. So the conversation has changed from, well, I need to fix this problem by implementing a project, to, well, there are other deeper issues that need to be actually dealt with. And the emotional intelligence aspect comes into play here. And a lot of it deals with problems at a leadership level and how they need to navigate through that within themselves. So that coaching and mentoring elements are very, very important here. And that's why it's, the outcomes-based blueprint that we've got here, it's tangible. But it encompasses not only just the technical aspects here, it's actually the leadership and the emotional aspects as well. Because most of these leaders sometimes just don't know what they want. They're just being driven by all the forces around them. But when we actually help them to recognize the challenges that they're facing and what's actually holding them back and how they need to close that gap on an emotional level as well, then it all kind of fits together. And, you mentioned about certain elements of, co-developing. So I say co-developing, co-piloting, and co-accomplishing.
Yeah.
And then you bring it home.
Yeah. Because, I think there's a sense of loneliness, right? And isolation as well, especially because, a lot of people are now working remote. And I think that camaraderie is missing. And having someone, because I think executive coaching is a explosive industry now, because I also have friends who are seeing a rise in that, where executives are feeling the sense of the burnout, the loneliness. And we're all human beings. At the end of the day, I say, no matter if your title is CEO, CX, it doesn't really matter. You're human at the end, and you are feeling that pressure, but you don't know how. Like, how do you change it? You got to move through these layers. First of all, admitting what's really at the core of the issue, because it's not for nothing that they've reached the layers that they have, right, in an organization. But in order to shift the mindset and be emotionally healthy, there's intellectual, emotional, and ethical intelligence, right? There's the three cornerstones I believe that I think human beings need in order to execute and be successful. I think that has to come in more, Joe. I think the voice that you have has got to grow louder, because I think I'm finding a lot of, even my clients, right, when we are working with clients, I can sense that, and they're telling us behind closed doors, right? They're like, well, we really don't know what to do. Our board demands us that we do AI, and it's no longer the hype cycle anymore. It's no longer, tell me what we're doing in AI so I can, report on our earnings call that, we put AI in here, or we're doing Web3 in here, which is largely just, sort of a show at the top. We're out of the hype cycle with a lot of these technologies. We're now entering a new era. Just before we started recording, we're talking about the fact there's something in the air that I feel like that exponential rise in business, like people are finally geared up. They feel like they're on the other side of the pandemic, and now you need new tools. Like, how are we going to do this, right? We got to get through remote work. We got to address burnout. We got to do innovation. We got to go, meet our business objectives. We got to go shift so many things. There's just so much coming at them. There's ESG goals, right? Climate change, like just massive. How do you help them prioritize?
Yeah.
Right.
It's through the conversations, right? So obviously, this new framework, and let's call it this new overarching blueprint. It is a blueprint which encompasses all of it, but you are able to pick and choose what you need to bring focus areas, bring prioritization, and bring that readiness,
Yeah.
the concept of that readiness, that transformation readiness to, that CXO or to the collective top team as well. And
Yeah.
it's important for those leaders to recognize that. And then the other aspect is a leadership element here as well. So it's when we look at larger frameworks and bigger organizations bringing in bigger frameworks, they're very much they're wide and they're very compartmentalized. But what we have here is a overarching framework that we can look at from a leadership perspective, from a technology perspective, or from the technical aspects as well, and bring all of that together and help each of those CXOs to not only prioritize, but actually go beyond the surface into the deeper side of things, and really recognize, how do you actually achieve this end goal here, and start with that end goal, and look at your business and look at you as a leader in 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and people are now building in plans into 2050.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of things are being predicted, right? Relative, I mean, the climate change stuff is already happening. It's here.
Yeah.
We're behind the 8 ball, clearly. That is interesting. I'm going to switch topics real quick, and I promise that's the last question. And I do want you to share, an insight before we close. What do you think about these leadership assessment tools? Like Myers-Briggs, the Gallup, I think the Clifton assessment, strength assessment. Do you think those are still relevant in helping leaders, from having that strength and understanding and mindset? Any views on that?
Absolutely, Jyoti. They are still relevant, and there are different versions of it. When done properly and when looked at it objectively, it becomes relevant.
So it still has a play, and because it's down to the human understanding. Fantastic. All right, I'm gonna wrap up, Stephen. Any final thoughts or wisdom you can share with our listeners and viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to call out in relation to some of the things that we talked about here. I mean, like from a stats perspective, I was just reading, the World Economic Forum and some of the research experts sharing some of the insights around, businesses undergoing cycles of change. One thing that actually stuck with me was about 20% of businesses fail because they did not achieve business performance and growth that they envisioned initially. And 96% of businesses will actually fail over a 5 to 10 year period of time because they become obsolete if they did not adopt new innovation. And as for the remaining 4%, it does not necessarily mean they have succeeded. It means that they have survived. And in some cases, they have thrived. So, my voice and our voice here on Exponential Age is that there is hope. That is if the business leader picks a sensible and right path. So, my message here is basically, we have entered that revolutionary state of exponential age where innovations across ecosystems are created at frenetic speeds. Yeah. So companies and business leaders need to act now to stay in that game and to build growth, performance, and competitive edge. And there's a new playbook in town, and we have it. So if you're a business leader within the top team or the board, I would strongly encourage you to embrace this for your company and for your own benefit as a leader, because you want to be swimming in that blue ocean, not the red ocean. So get in touch, Jyoti, with you yourself and with me, and then let's get this moving.
Yeah. I tell the leaders that we work with, so, there's 5 years, a window I'm not kidding, because if you don't shift into new frameworks to bridge that chasm and get to the other side, there will be companies that will no longer exist. I mean, we've seen that with Blockbuster. We've seen that with there's so many examples, littered through history, where they didn't shift fast enough. And it's a conversation that needs to be had. And, some of the leaders say, well, I'm only going to be here for another, 1 year and I'm going to exit. I said, where are you going to go? You're still going to go to a company that's going to need this. So you're going to need, and I think it's the inner transformation that underpins this external transformation and readiness, right? Stephen, thank you. A brilliant conversation as always. I'm sure we're going to be doing much more, on this topic. But for those of you who want to get in touch with Stephen, what's the best way for them to reach you?
They can go into my LinkedIn profile or stephen.paul@info or leadershipexpose.com, and we'll definitely get in touch.
Yeah, which is, by the way, is a fantastic forum as well. Highly recommend everybody get in, because Stephen shares a lot more about this in depth over there. Thank you, Stephen, again. Fantastic conversation. We will talk to you soon.
Joti, thank you very much for having me. I look forward to working with you.
Yep, same here. Take care. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.